afternoon. Today, I would like to talk about the reality of parenting students who are doing their learning online. And you may note on my front screen here that my biggest title is Mother of a Middle School Remote Learner. And so I'm here to talk about the journey I've been on learning to parent an online learner. So to introduce myself, I am a teacher. I've spent 25 years working in education at this point in time. My son, as it states on my main page here, is a middle schooler now, and he is in the remote learning program. My husband, his father, is a educational psychologist. At different times in this presentation, you may hear some terminology that rings of psychological terms. By no means am I a psychologist, but I do parent with a psychologist. And so some of his terms and his thinking will come out in some of my slides here today. We're going to Hawaii, folks. Experts say that when a plane leaves its city of origin to fly to a destination, it's going to spend 98% of its time off course. That means the captain and the crew are going to spend all but 2% of their time that is spent in the air adjusting the course. They're going to be battling jet streams and winds and inclement weather and avoiding other airplanes out there. And I'm sure there's a myriad of other things that I know nothing about that they have to handle when we're in the air. But we always make it to our destination. You don't buy a ticket to Hawaii and when you deplane, you find you're in Peru. That's not the way this works. We always make it to our destination. We may be a little later than what we had intended. We may have a layover somewhere that wasn't part of the plan, but we always get to the destination. And I think that parenting a student in online school is very much like flying to Hawaii. I think we're constantly adjusting our strategies and our methods and our plan and our discipline. I think parenting as a whole is like flying to Hawaii. So instead of fighting it, let's go with the flow. We're going to Hawaii, folks. One of the things I've learned this year being a parent of an online learner is how much more work it is on the parenting end. Sending my child to school on the bus and having a teacher manage his day was quite a bit easier than parenting the remote learner. One of the things that we're up against with this form of education is that the remote teachers, they have very limited leverage and power as compared to a traditional school. Teaching in a traditional school allows you to run into kids in the hallway. At recess time or at lunchtime, you see that kid who's got some late work and you hunt them down and you bring them to your classroom and you insist that they finish the work, or if it's done, that they hand it in to you so you can grade it. The remote teachers don't have any of that. When they click disconnect at the end of their remote session, that's the end of it. They don't see our children again until the next online session, which is likely going to be a full 24-hour cycle. So that proximity that teachers use, when they look over the kids' shoulders and they kind of watch what the kids are doing, they don't have that anymore. And so we the parents at home, we have to be that proximity by proxy. We have to be checking in on the work the kids are doing. We have to be the quality control. We have to make sure that they are doing what is required of them. And that takes time. But these are kids, and that's the bottom line, is we are working with children and their brain development is still underway. Experts say that the human brain is not fully developed until age 25. So that means our kiddos are going to struggle with things like time management and staying on track. So we are going to be their surrogate prefrontal cortex. That's that front part of the brain where we talk and we organize and we plan, and all our rational thinking happens in the prefrontal cortex of our brain. We have to be that prefrontal cortex for our kiddos because that part of their brain is still developing. It isn't always easy to play that role, and it isn't always fun to play that role, but it's so important. Kids need adult guidance, and they have limited time and limited access to their online teachers. And so they have to rely on us as parents to do that for them. And sometimes that can be frustrating. Sometimes you're tired. You don't feel like being in that role. And then you realize your child is missing a bunch of assignments or they've got a bunch of late stuff. And today is not the day. You've worked a long day. but it is what it is. So, as I've been on my journey through parenting a remote learner, I've come to realize that proactive communication is my best friend. Because if I've talked about something in advance, when a problem arises, my son isn't caught off guard by it. I'm not reacting to what he's done. So my first point here is proactive versus reactive. And it's very easy with a remote learner to get into a bit of a cycle of reaction. I find out he's missing a bunch of work and I react, and I see some grades that I don't like and I react, and I don't feel like he's managing his time the way I want him to, and I react. So I've tried to structure a more proactive environment where we talk about things ahead of time. I tell him very clearly what my expectation is for him. I try to be open and I try to be calm and I try to listen. But I can't do that when I'm hijacked. So we say no hijacks. And what I mean by hijack, it's a term that psychologists use to talk about the power in our brain. So the amygdala, which is the source of our hijack, they call it an amygdala hijack. That's the old ancient part of your brain. It's right at the stem of the brain, kind of where your spinal cord terminates and brain begins. And that's our oldest, most ancient part of our brain. Cavemen had amygdalas. They may not have had much more of a brain than just the amygdala, but they had the amygdala. As humans have evolved and developed and advanced, we now have a much more complex brain. And that front part, I just mentioned it, that prefrontal cortex, that's right up under your forehead. That's where rational thinking and speech and planning and all of those things we use to be these advanced primates, that's where that lives. But what happens when we get emotional is all the power that we normally on a day-to-day basis, normally it's just up there in the front part of our brain. We're going to work, we're organizing things, we're planning our grocery lists, all those things we do on a day-to-day basis. But when we get emotional, all that power that's up there in the front part of the brain, it drains. And it drains back into the good old amygdala. And that's where emotion is housed. It doesn't matter who we are. As soon as we're hijacked, it's not a teachable moment. It's not a learnable moment. Nobody learns when they're on an amygdala hijack. Heck, that's why the term crime of passion exists, because those are crimes that are committed when a person has been hijacked. So my advice on this one is talk to your children at a time when there isn't something going wrong. Explain your complicated role to them. Talk to them about the fact that you have a foot in two pools. One foot is in the parent pool. That's been in that pool since the day they were born. The other foot is in the teacher pool. And that's probably only been in that pool since quarantine started. And even more so since last fall, when most kids in this area of the world went back to school in the face-to-face classroom. But some of us did not send our kids back into those classrooms. We've kept them at home. We're teaching and we're parenting, and they're going to overlap, and that does make things complicated. So talk about this with your child when you're not upset about something, when things are going good. Because as soon as we bring in animosity or aggression or overt frustration, that's not going to be a productive conversation with our children. These are our enemies, because as parents, we want this to be as smooth as possible. The less intervening we have to do, the better it is. The better our relationships are with the kids, the easier this all is. But we have to be in a place where we can also enforce things. And sometimes we're going to lose our patience. Sometimes it's going to be the third time our kid has made the same mistake with turning something in or finishing something or planning something. So when that happens, let the earth turn. Because as the earth turns, the power is going to come back into your rational part of the brain. You'll be able to think it through. We're the grown-ups in the situation. And so we have to give it time to get our rational brain back so that we can have those very important conversations that don't damage our kids in a very personal sort of a way. Because as their parents, we can hurt them, and we can hurt them deeply, because they care. They care what we think of them. They care how we view them in our minds. And if there's anybody on the planet that your child doesn't want to disappoint, it's you. And so if you approach this through a lens of disappointment every time you talk about online school, it's really not going to help your relationship with your child. And a year into this quarantine scenario, relationships are so important. Sometimes you're going to have to be the enforcer. Welcome to teacher life. It is a wild ride of overlapping roles. Sometimes you're the enforcer, sometimes you're imposing consequences, sometimes you're rewarding the child, sometimes you are nagging or you're bothering or you're chasing them down to get this done, and you have to say it over and over and over. It doesn't matter who our children are. It doesn't matter if we have very academic kids who like school, or if we have children with learning disorders or other diagnoses. What we don't want to get into is the struggle of parent versus child. You are the parent, the buck stops with you. You make the decisions, not the children. But it's tough when you're hijacked, as we just talked, because frustration is very real as we parent children who are learning online. But if we've had those proactive conversations, hopefully our children understand we're on the same team, because we are. I am on my son's team 100%. At different times, I'm sure he feels like I'm his adversary, but I'm not. I'm on the same team as him, and we've had many conversations now about that over time, because I can look like I'm the enemy when I'm constantly nagging him about schoolwork. In previous years, that nagging fell to his teacher, and so there was a differentiation of role. This is much more blurry now with online learning. But if we've had those conversations and we've made those deals and we've talked about whose responsibility is what, that takes a burden off you, mom, dad, guardian, grandma, grandpa, whoever you are that's overseeing the child's learning. If we're enforcing deals that we've previously made, that's a lot less stressful and a lot less negative for both parties than trying to deal with a problem in the moment that we discover that there is a problem. Let's talk for a moment about the child as a communicator. Kids are not typically real great communicators, especially about school. If you ask them how was school today, 99% of the time I bet you get an answer that has something to do with lunchtime, recess time, or physical education. They don't talk about math. They don't talk about science. We have to probe them. We have to ask specifically about those things if we want to know those answers. And ideally, we want to have this kind of a conversation before the school year starts. But that's not always possible. Good news is you're the parent, you're in charge. You can have a family meeting or a conversation about online school anytime you want. This is your home. These are your decisions, and you are in charge. The buck stops with you. Now, that doesn't mean that our children have no say in things. The more input they have when we have these conversations about what our expectations are, the more input they have, the more buy-in they will have to the process. And so I think that if we sit and we talk, we want them to buy in to the philosophy, to the plans, to the family decisions. We want them to be on our team. Because if we're fighting against our kids, this can turn really stressful really fast. So give them some input. If they feel like they want to do their math first every day, and then they want to have a break, listen to that. And then advise them. Give them feedback about that. Tell them what is going to work. Tell them what isn't going to work. Listen for what they're really saying. Because as we ask more questions of them, we're going to get further details. You may find out that they've been avoiding math because they don't understand something, and that might be really easily solved. And then math can be off and running seamlessly again. But school overall is a great place to learn responsibility. School can be really contrived at times, but it is a good place to learn your own responsibility. And remote learning can really be the beginning of time management skills. But they're only going to learn those skills if we invest the time to help make sure that they notice when they do it right. That when they do it wrong, we talk to them about the opportunity to fix the mistake and redo something or rework something, but doing it to the best of their ability and learning how to just sit down, put your whole thought into it, and do it right the first time It's a great skill to have for life. And we as parents have a wonderful opportunity this year to participate in the learning of those skills. So we do have a wonderful opportunity here to help our kids learn those really important skills. What do we do when they get frustrated? Because that's going to happen. The biggest thing we can do when the child is frustrated is affirm them and reaffirm them and buck them up. They're going to be frustrated. They may cry. They may want to punch their pillow. They're going to need to vent that frustration, but we need to keep propping them up. You can do this. I'm here to help. You've done something like this before once. Do you remember that time you can put whatever you want into that. You can connect it to something from outside of school sports or something they did one time in the summertime with you that was challenging and they learned it. Show them some empathy. Remote learning is hard. You're doing great. This isn't easy. We've never been through a quarantine before, but I think you're doing really well with what you're trying to do here. I'm so proud of you. Being at home and learning by yourself without all your friends around you, that's not easy. Tell them you've earned a break. You're such a hard worker. And that's a great opportunity to reflect your family values, whatever those are in terms of hard work. And then you can always tell them, great job today with your science. Always make sure you focus on their area of biggest struggle. If your child struggles with social studies, that's the one you want to keep bucking them up about, because that's going to be the place that they're going to fold when things get tough. So you really want to just be that cheerleader. And sometimes you might feel a little bit silly being such a positive reinforcement cheerleader, happy, happy, happy off there in the background. But they need it. They need to hear that they're doing it right because they've never done this before. If we're overwhelmed and we're feeling like this is a big undertaking, so are our kids. Just like we've never done this before, neither have they. Psychological studies are absolutely conclusive that the only way, and it's not even close, the only way to achieve behavior change in another human being is through positive reinforcement. You want to catch them doing it right. So if they've been procrastinating language arts for weeks and weeks and weeks, the day that you walk past and they're working on language arts and you didn't have to do something to compel that, say something about it. Buddy, you're working on LA. I'm so proud of you. I know you don't love LA, but look at you doing it there. They need to hear those things from us. And sometimes you're going to feel like an idiot saying what seems so obvious to you, but do it. Trust me on this one, do it. It's worth it. So I've mentioned a couple times having a family meeting. So if you're feeling like things have kind of spiraled out of control, we're at the beginning-ish of a new semester. We've still got 4 months to go in this school year. And that's lots of time. That's lots of time for our kids to make a change. That's lots of time to sort out some of the things that haven't been done properly. And we're looking for progress, not perfection. If I sit down with my boy tonight and we have a conversation, we talk about all of his subjects, in no way do I expect that by tomorrow it's going to be perfection because we talked about it. It's not. These are humans. Just like I need time to build and learn new skills, so do they. So I'm just looking for progress. I want to see him do better with it tomorrow than he did today. The other outcome we want reduced stress for you. Mom and Dad, I know that you're living with a lot of stress these days. Grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, guardian, foster parent. This is a lot of stress, this quarantine. Let's take this opportunity to reduce the stress for you by being a little proactive with things, and let's reduce the stress for the kiddos. When they know what we expect from them, the odds of them achieving it is so much higher. Just keep reiterating that you are their teammate. You're not an adversary. You're not against them. And directly tell them how much you care about their education. I was really jaw-dropped this year when I was asking my own son some questions about what he was doing in online learning. He seemed shocked that I was interested. Yet, I've asked him about his day at school every year from kindergarten through grade 5. Things only changed this year in grade 6. I still care about his education just as much as I ever did. But he had a different sense because it's being structured so differently. And the final outcome that you want from a family meeting is you want the ability to reinforce the things you want to see more of and you want to enforce the decisions and the rules that everyone agrees to. So when we have our family meeting, we want to set it up so that everyone in our family understands what the expectations are and everyone agrees to it. That includes parents, that includes all kids, and anyone else who may be living with your family at this point in time. This is a team effort, and we want everyone playing on the same team. Some guiding questions, and these should be asked of each of your children. And I would encourage, as we're talking positively about one another, I would encourage every family member to say something good. So we're going to talk to the oldest kid first, or we're going to talk to the youngest kid first, however you want to do it. But ask them things like, what do you feel is going well for you at school? Start on the positive. What are you learning about in math? What are you learning about in science? Which parts are you finding easy? Of the first 3 questions, 2 of them are positive and 1 of them is quite neutral. Asking what they're learning about in any given subject, that doesn't really have a lot of emotion to it. That's just a fact check. You're just getting the facts for yourself. Question 4 starts into a little bit more of the challenges. What are you finding difficult recently? Question number 4 starts into some of those challenges. What are you finding difficult recently? And that might be subject matter. That might be something to do with peers. You might find out your Wi-Fi has been dropping and they've been being kicked off their Google Meets inadvertently and they never mentioned it to you. It could be any number of things, but you want to know. Ask them what part of remote learning are they really good at. Give them the opportunity to talk about their grief as it pertains to not going to regular school. What do you miss most about going to school? That's going to be a very enlightening question for you as the parent. Ask them what they like best about being in remote learning. Then ask them, is there anything that I do that makes remote learning more difficult for you? That might be a tough question to ask. As parents, it can be hard to ask the kids for a bit of a review, but you might find out something like, well, the radio is always on and it kind of distracts me. Do you think we could turn the radio off when I'm on my Google Meet? You might be surprised how minor the thing is that is making remote learning more difficult and how easily changed it is. And though it may be a very minor thing for you as a parent, it could be a really big deal for your child. And if they've been wanting to address it but haven't had the courage or the opportunity, question number 8 swings that door open so that the kids can give us that feedback. And then ask them another question. Is there anything I do that makes remote learning easier for you? Because that's something that I could do more of. If he tells me that when I check in with him after school and talk about the day, that makes it easier because it settles it in his head, I'll do that every day if he tells me that that's helping things. Can you think of anything I could be doing that would help you with your schoolwork? These are all really good questions, and certainly you can ask more questions than this. But I would recommend these 10 questions as kind of a basic for each child in a family meeting. Let the other children in the family speak positively about their sibling. Again, you might be surprised what they'll say about each other and what they've observed. Kids are amazing in their ability to observe. They just don't always communicate it. Then, once you've had the meeting, draw up a contract. Put it in writing. What has your child agreed to do, or what have they agreed to change with respect to their schooling? And what role will you be playing in this? When we put it in writing, there's a number of things that are positive about this. The likelihood of the kids abiding by it and agreeing to it and remembering it, they're way higher. When my boy was a baby, he did this thing I called rubber baby. If I picked him up to go somewhere and he didn't want to go, it was like he turned into jello. It was like his bones liquefied. He would just kind of slide out of my arms. It's like he turned into rubber. When we don't have a contract in place, it's really easy for our kids to rubber baby as it pertains to their responsibilities. When we put it in writing, they can't tell us that that's not the agreement we had, or I didn't think that's what we were talking about. When we put it in writing, we are assuring that everyone understands what they're supposed to do and what the consequences may be of not doing it. And this includes the parents. When we put down what we're agreeing to, it becomes really formal. And because our children see us as having a contract as well, they're going to take their contract even more seriously. Some do's and don'ts, and you will find the more comprehensive list of these in the booklet that accompanies this presentation. But do check in with your child daily regarding their lessons, their workload, their understanding. Don't assume that just because they haven't said anything otherwise that all is well. As we mentioned earlier in this presentation, kids can be really tough at communicating about school. Ally with your child's teacher. If ever you had a school year where your child's teacher is not the enemy or is not the villain, it's the year of remote learning. You need that teacher on your side. You need to work with that teacher. This becomes a very lonely path if we isolate ourselves from the teachers of these kids. They have one adult responsible for their education this year. You don't want to isolate yourself from that person, and you don't want to speak negatively about your child's teacher in front of your children. Frustration can happen. I understand that. If you need to vent about your child's teacher, whatever you do, don't do that when your child can hear you. They have one person that they can connect to this year for their education, and they need to feel confident in that person. If you need to vent, vent to your best friend about this, vent to your spouse about this, but whatever you do, don't let your child hear you venting. That just destroys their relationship with that teacher, and they will approach the entire rest of the school year with skepticism and negativity. Save yourself from the fallout of that. If you get frustrated, vent in a safe place. Do log into your child's Google Classroom and check View My Work weekly. That's going to involve logging in as your child. But your child is under the age of majority, and so having their login and password is absolutely your right. And the more often you check in on this, the smaller any problems are going to be, because you're going to nip them in the bud. So whatever you do, don't avoid Google Classroom altogether. Do log into Powerschool to view assessment information. Please don't miss out on that invaluable data that Powerschool offers. And right now in Chinook's Edge, we have Powerschool only for grade 5 and up, but as we move forward in time, eventually that is going to be all students. We'll have assessment data in Powerschool on a regular basis. Do sign up for the daily emails from Google Classroom. If your child has missed an assignment, you will know about it through this email. You'll also see what's going on this week, what's due in the foreseeable future. I was really surprised as a parent as to how informed I feel thanks to those emails. I was expecting it to be really point form type thing, kind of a loose framework. I am amazed at how much information is contained in those emails. Do support your kid when they're struggling. Do help them with their learning. If they don't understand something in math and you can reteach it to them, by all means do. But whatever you do, don't do the work for them. As a teacher, and I'll just put my teacher hat on here for a second, when parents do the work for the child, it is so obvious to the teacher. And all that happens with that is we have a teacher then in the position to have to contact us and have a conversation about that. And the teacher is going to spend a number of days worrying about how they're going to even broach this topic with you. Please don't do the work for your child. It doesn't help anything, including you. It helps nothing. Part of learning is doing it wrong. Part of learning is doing it wrong the first time. Liken it to video games. And that sounds like a strange thing for me to say. But if your child downloaded a new video game, either for their console or off Steam, if they entered the game and they beat the whole thing the first time, they'd be angry, as they should. That's a baby game. It's not challenging. It's not interesting. It's not anything. It's disappointing. Yet they come into school and they have this idea in their little heads that they need to do it right the first time. No, they don't. They need to try it. They need to try their best. They need to make mistakes. They need to have those mistakes corrected. They need to try it again. And sometimes they need to try it again and again and again. And here's the funny thing. If it's Super Mario Brothers, every time their character dies, they're back at the beginning of the course, or if they've managed to get past a checkpoint, they may start at the checkpoint. And they will go back to the beginning over and over and over and over to try to do it right. Schoolwork's no different. Sometimes we have to do it over and over and over to get it right. But we have no problem with it when it's a video game. So let's try to lose the stigma on failing as it pertains to schoolwork. Okay, so you've had a family meeting. You've made your agreements, you've drawn up the contracts, and everything's been going great for 2 days. Now your middle child is in tears, like ugly crying. We had it all sorted out, didn't we? Being a kid is hard. There's so much to learn. And then there's hormones. And then there's learning how to manage your own emotions. And so frustration in the face of new concepts is real. It happens. And sometimes kids need some help managing that emotional response. The first instinct is probably going to be to avoid the thing that is causing them this frustration. They may begin to procrastinate the task. And odds are good that's not quite aligning with the contracts you drew up at that family meeting. The first thing we do when this happens is we comfort them. That is not the time to talk about responsibilities. It is not the time to talk about procrastination. That is the time to pull them in closely, affirm them. They're no happier about this than you are. Hug them, hold them, comfort them, and then begin the process. And start by breaking the task down into smaller, more manageable parts. Remove some of the overwhelmingness for them. Kiddo, we're just going to do question 1 right now. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to help you. We're just doing the first question. Then we're going to take a break. We can do this. Talk about how the task is similar to some other task they've done previously. Doesn't even need to be a school task. Reassure them. Reassure them that you are there to help, that you will figure this out with them, or you will sit and contact the teacher with them. Encourage them to go into one of the extra meets with their teacher. Encourage them to go and get that help. The teachers are there and they're available. And if you can't make any progress with this, communicate then with the child's teacher. Tell the teacher what you've tried, what sort of worked, what didn't work, and brainstorm together some ideas to help your child. 2 brains are always better than 1. And if you've got your parent lens on and they've got their teacher lens on and everybody is working to educate this child, well, if we're all on the same team, is there really anything we can't do? Probably not. But be there for your child, reassure them, and help them through this. These things are complicated. Learning online is complicated. I stumbled on a line a number of years ago with my son, totally by accident, but it has become the most disarming phrase that I can use when he is mounting in frustration. And I've used it in my own classroom with grade 7, grade 8, and grade 9 students. And the line was this: "It's hard being little. There is so much to learn." So when I see a child who's frustrated, I now use that line. When I'm talking to my junior high kids, I would caveat before I said it. I don't mean this in the offensive way. I'm not calling you a baby, but I want to really acknowledge here, it's hard being a kid. There's so much to learn. And what that does is it gives them a free pass. You didn't know. Now you do. Second time is deliberate, and the second time there's going to be consequences. But that first time's for learning. It's hard being a kid. There is so much to learn. The minute we give a child a bit of empathy, we've got them eating out of our hand. And you'll be able to see the stress start to evaporate the moment you say that. So in my home, we have gone with the Chore Chart. I am not physically present in my home. My home is an hour and a half away from work. So during the work week, I stay with my father, and my son and my husband stay at our home. Consistency is key. And so what I was finding is we had some things like, he's not reading for 20 minutes every day. And I know that because I haven't bought him any more books. My husband wasn't even aware he was supposed to be reading for 20 minutes. So you see, that's on this chart. And the chart itself is just a whiteboard from Amazon. I speak positively about his teacher. Regardless of what his level of frustration is, I speak positively about his teacher. And to be candid, I have absolutely no complaints about any of our remote learning staff. We have some superstar teachers in that program. And so when I say I speak positively about his teacher, that's not, I'm restraining my negative comments. I have been blown away by how good these teachers are. And I have seen firsthand on the inside the dedication that they have to all of our kids. And this is a complicated teaching assignment for all of them. They are prepping and marking 8 core subjects and managing at least 100 students. It's an unbelievable workload. Get those daily emails from Google Classroom. I get those every day at about 4:03. I'm driving home and I get the email from Google Classroom. And my son knows, because this is a rule that came out of one of our family meetings. If there's anything on that email that shows me he has something that hasn't been turned in and it was previously due, he'd better text me by 4 o'clock, tell me what it is that's going to be late and what he's doing about it. If I have to contact him, we're going to have a problem. If he contacts me, then we're going to work things out and I will work on his team. If I have to contact him, I'm back in that enforcer role, and I prefer to not be in that role if I can avoid it. But if I can't avoid it, then I'm going to enforce. Visual reminders. This is posted in our house in a very obvious place where he's going to walk by it a whole bunch of times in the day. And then we give him verbal reminders. For me, some of those come on text message these days, but his dad gives him verbal reminders throughout the evening as well. I have to show regular interest and I have to inquire all of the time. I have to keep asking him about it. He has to perceive that I'm interested. If he thinks for a second I'm not interested, our communication lines are closed. And I need to underscore to him frequently. And I was not prepared for this. I was completely actually caught off guard by this. I have to underscore to him the fact that I am here to help. I'm a teacher and he's reluctant to ask me for help. I have to keep reminding him that I will help him. I want to help him. I will show up to help him. And it's taken half a school year, but he is finally taking me up on this. So I'm going to show you a few text messages that we've had over time. And so this first one, this was recent, as you can tell, and he was needing some help, and it was actually in long division. He'd forgotten how to do it. But then you'll notice, and I put this on reluctantly, but you'll notice that I have actually used an expletive. My son right now, he's in the stage of development where he wants to use those words. So this is his currency. It doesn't matter how I feel about this. This is his currency. And if he wants to use bad language, well, bad language is for adults. And so if he's behaving like a child and missing assignments and not putting forth his best effort on his schoolwork, not in my house is he going to use any of those words. But when he's on top of things and doing his best and not requiring me to be the enforcer all the time, then I will let him say a few of those words. Nothing excessively, nothing extreme, but, if he dropped an S-bomb while playing a game, I wouldn't step on him. But if he's got anything missing from school, that's a hard no in my house. So in that instance, no, he's not going to be using any grown-up words if he's behaving like a child. Okay, here's another one. Done my lesson. That was referring to a piano lesson. So I sent the screenshot at 5 o'clock, and you see we've got 4 things overdue here, and he hasn't texted me. So here's his screenshot. What's the plan here? At this point in time, he had some work he had not put in his best effort on, and so he was going back and redoing some stuff, and his comment was, the plan is that I do the... And I should have said, the plan is that I do them. Got so caught up in stuff I already did, I forgot to do the new stuff. So, okay, you forgot to do the new stuff? This was an example of a time when more parent intervention was needed. Fast forward a month now to today, he's caught up again. He's got the stuff done that wasn't done, and the stuff that was incomplete. Oh yeah, we had a family meeting over that too, but that has now been taken care of as well. Here's another one. Where are you? Is your schoolwork done? And I get the response. And then earlier, this was just last week, remote teachers need to have their grades entered into Powerschool by Friday. And I've been telling him this year, I don't want to hear I'm sorry. I'm sorry doesn't help us move things forward. So when I tell him that any work he needs to have submitted needs to be fixed by Friday, I don't want to hear something like I'm sorry. I want to hear a plan. Sorry is all about the past. A plan is all about the future. So the response was, I know, and I have that in mind. I can do this and I will. That is far more helpful in my world than sorry. And that gives me an opportunity to positive reinforce him. And that is gold. So I look for every opportunity I have now to positively reinforce this kid. I want to talk about MO. MO is short for momentum. And MO is a tough guest to attract. You want to have Mo come into your house because once you've got momentum, momentum keeps things going. So to keep him around, you want to reward him. So momentum can look like bait him, can look like bribe him, can look like positive reinforcement. You might have to fawn over Mo to keep him, but you want to keep him. Always try first to use positive reinforcement because it keeps Mo in your house. If you have to resort to punitive measures, yeah, good old Mo skips out the back door, and then you're back trying to bait him back into your house with treasure. So whenever you can, if one of your kids or if all of your kids are on a positive momentum trajectory with your schoolwork, do everything you can to keep that positive momentum going, because Mo can be negative too. That's what happens when we start to procrastinate and we get into that negative momentum where we kind of over time come to a grinding halt, and then we have negative Mo to deal with. We want positive Mo. He's a tough guest to attract, but once you got him, keep him. So here are a couple printables that are part of the booklet that accompanies this presentation. There is a contract form in that booklet. And you'll note that it's got a place for the parent to agree to certain things and the student to agree to certain things. And both student and parent sign it. And when your child sees you signing to agree to your responsibilities, they're going to take it all that much more seriously. And you'll note that there's a start date and a review date. With kids, a contract for a couple weeks is about as long as they can handle. Older kids, a little bit longer, and every kid is different. Your child might be able to handle a longer term than a 2-week term. You might be able to go month to month. Littler kids, they're going to need to have this revisited a little more frequently. And then I've got a checklist for the family meeting as well. So you just want to ensure you cover all of these topics. You want to make it positive. Every person in the meeting expresses something positive about each family member. Bonus points if the positive statements happen to be about remote learning. Before the school day begins, what's expected of your child or your children? Those first 5 things I expect done before his Google Meet, which is at 10 o'clock for him. So just like if he was going to a real school, I want shower, I want teeth brushed, I want hair combed, deodorant on, and I want him dressed. That's not negotiable. When you have your family meeting, you may be wanting to talk about what do you expect of your kids before their school day begins. If your kids are sharing devices for this, who should have which device and when? What supports do the kids feel they require from the parents? What is something that motivates each child? You want to know their currency. And honestly, you saw how stupid one of my currencies is here. He wants to use swear words. Never would I ever have thought of that as a currency for motivation, but it's real and it works in my situation. And then figure out what is the something negative that each child would prefer to avoid at all costs. We want to do as much positive reinforcement as we can, but if we have to bring in some consequences, we also want those to pack some meaning. So just like the positive reinforcement packs meaning, so also are the punitive measures going to need to pack some meaning. There are some resources here. They are also linked in the back of the printable. So we do have some resources for Google Classroom, a few tutorials. I've done a blog post on improving your home internet connection. So if you're having some challenges with getting on the Google Meet and staying on the Google Meet, there are some tips there to troubleshoot a few things. If you're not getting those emails from Google Classroom, I've given you the link for that. And if you're not getting those and the link there is of no use to you, please do connect with your child's teacher and we can start to try and sort that out. Occasionally we do come into a few glitches. And then the Powerschool stuff in Chinook's Edge, that's for grades 5 and up. Our K through 4 don't have content yet in Powerschool, but that is coming in the future. So I hope this was helpful. I would encourage you, if you need some support or if you have some particular questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I do work for our school district here. I am involved in certain capacities with the remote learning, and I'm happy to be a resource for you, either as a fellow parent who understands this journey or as an educator with some experience and knowledge of remote teaching and the distributed learning pedagogy. So I am here. I'm here to help. Please reach out as you need me. Thank you for your time today.